Welcome to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. Join me each week as I interview experts who will share the science of sugar, sugar addiction, and different approaches to recovery. We hope to empower you with the information and inspiration, insights, and strategies you need to break up with sugar and fall in love with healthy whole foods so you can prevent and reverse chronic disease, lose weight, boost your mood and energy. Feel free to go to my website for details on my coaching programs and to access free resources, kicksugarcoach.com. Hello and welcome everybody to the podcast. And I'm just going to read, I have a special guest today, Roberta Ruggiero. Ruggiero, thank you. Okay. I'm going to read her bio. She's the president and founder of the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation. She's the author of the acclaimed book, The Do's and Don'ts of Hypoglycemia, an Everyday Guide to Low Blood Sugar, now in its 5th edition. She has dedicated her life to increasing the awareness of the causes, the effects, and the treatment of hypoglycemia. And she knows firsthand the plight of hypoglycemia. She's walked this path. She's found her own recovery, and she's turned around to help other people understand this very misunderstood and often misdiagnosed or completely missed factor in people struggling with their health. Misdiagnosed herself for over 10 years, Roberta turned her life around by changing her diet. She now inspires and gives hope to those suffering from hypoglycemia all around the world. Welcome, Roberta.
Welcome. I'm so excited that I'm here. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for welcoming me.
Oh, yes. And thank you for this information. It's going to be life-changing for people when they really understand there's so much of the connection between food and mood, and in particular, the hypoglycemia, the reactive hypoglycemia piece that most people miss. So why don't you start with your story? Like, what was it like when you were caught up in cycles of hypoglycemia that you didn't even know about?
Okay, I'll have to really start at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it goes way back. I'm really exposing myself. 1960, when I speak in front of an audience, I try to break everybody's nervous. What is she going to speak about? And I say that 1960 was a very big year. I graduated high school. I got engaged. I got married. And I wanted a baby. I didn't even think of anything. It's not like today, you weigh, can you afford it? Where are you going to, how are you going to raise it? All of that. I just wanted to. And I think the fact that I basically had studied for 4 or 5 years to be a nun. And I was just starting to fill out the papers and collect everything. And I went to a family party, and in walked in a 6'2" gentleman in an Air Force uniform. And that was it. Everything changed. It was a very difficult time, and I could smile right now, but it was a very difficult decision. But since I had studied so much about religion and Spanish and Latin, I wasn't prepared to work outside. So once we got married and I tried to get a job, they wanted to pay me like $38 a week. And I said, this is ridiculous. You have a good job. How about we just start having a family? And he put me on a pedestal and just said, whatever you want, never thinking of anything. So I became pregnant right away. And I didn't even know what a gynecologist was. I just picked the name out of the yellow pages back then. And I went to a doctor. He confirmed I was pregnant. And I said, is there anything I have to do? No, don't worry about it. So I went home and I just ate. And I ate and I ate everything I craved. I come from an Italian family, so it was pasta and it was bread and it was dessert. And I would go back to him and I say, Doctor, I'm gaining a lot of weight. And he says, don't worry about it. It's very natural. Well, I gained like 50, 60 pounds. Yes. So, and he said it was fine. Well, I had my daughter in 61 and I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get her home. But then something happened when I got her home. All of a sudden, this baby that I wanted so much, I got into a deep depression and I started to cry. I mean, I don't mean cry. I mean like a deluge of tears and then some. And I said, something's wrong to my husband. He says, no, well, all right, let's go to the doctor. And I went. And he says, oh, don't worry about it. It's after baby blues. So after about a couple of weeks later, I went back again. He says, don't worry. He said, here's Valium. That was my first introduction to Valium. I said, okay. Within a couple of months, I became pregnant again. And yes, and 16, my son was born and they were just, 14, 15 months apart. But every symptom that I had with my daughter was intensified. My depression, my headaches. I mean, I had headaches from the morning until night. My headaches, my shakes, cold hands, cold feet, fatigue. I mean, I just couldn't get out of bed. It was very difficult. I had two small children. I didn't know what to do. Again, I would go to the doctor. This is very normal. You have two children. And he just increased my Valium. Okay. And then 6 months later, a year later, I would always go back and say, doctor, this is not normal. My head. So he says, all right, he took an electroencephalogram. Then he took a spinal tap. And before you know it, 5 years had passed. And I started to get, really depressed, like almost suicidal. I started to withdraw. I started to be embarrassed because people couldn't understand what was happening to me. Why wasn't I happy? Like they were talking behind my back. Is he beating her? What's happening? I couldn't function. And I tried to put on this big, I'm okay. I'm grateful, which I was, but I wasn't really functioning. So finally, after 5 years, when I went and the doctor said, listen, every time I take a test, whether you're in the hospital or in the office, they're all negative. You're fine. He says, it has to be emotional. He said, so I think you should go to a psychiatrist. Well, you're talking about 1967. Nobody went to see a psychiatrist. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. Again, I picked someone out, from the yellow pages. And I went, it was dark and dreary. And his conclusion was that I got married too young, had children too soon. And instead of the Valium, he started giving me other medications. He started giving me Thorazine, 50 milligrams. Then when I went to see him, he started giving me Mellaril and then Tofranil, and then went from 50 milligrams to 100 to 150. So after that, about a year, I says to my husband, it's not working. So I went to a second psychiatrist. And he said the same thing. There's nothing physically wrong with you. It has to be that you're severely depressed, now suicidal, because you got married too young. You had children too soon. And I said, well, what do I do now? I can't do anything. Help me to function. And the same thing. It was just more medications. So I went to a third psychiatrist. Now you're talking about my symptoms started in 61. This is now 68. So I went to my third psychiatrist, and all I heard, Florence, was that I have a treatment that'll help you. That's all I heard. It's not today where you question your doctor. You just put him on a pedestal and you trust them. You don't ask questions. And I just said, I'll take it. That's how naive I was. But I don't think so much naive as I was desperate. I was desperate. I will do anything to feel good, to be able to function. So I signed papers, didn't know what I was signing. My husband took me on the morning. It was like yesterday. Went there, saw the hospital, went up the steps, went inside, said goodbye. I was so excited. And he says, I'll see you. I don't know when, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I says, that's okay. I'm going to be okay. So as soon as I got in the elevator, I just, you ever feel something's going to happen? Well, all I saw were bars. And the closer I got up to where I was getting off, I started to hear screams and crying. And I was asked to go into this room and to strip. Florence, I could tell you the story now. It's 40 plus years later, but I couldn't talk about it for 10 years. So I was stripped of everything, even my miraculous medal, my wedding band, and they gave me something to put on. And then I went to my room and I just heard screams and cries. And when I looked outside, I saw just patients crying and screaming and rocking. if you saw one flew over the cuckoo's nest, that's exactly how it was. And I said, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. Then I realized what was happening. I was going to have electric shock therapy treatments. And I begged them, I said, please, I didn't know that I was signing up for this. Please, I beg you, get in touch with my husband. I got to get out. I got to get out. They said, no, you signed for a series and you have to have a series. And I just begged. And I remember the first one as if it was yesterday, what they did, how they strapped me down, my legs, my feet, my arms, you know, how they take your tongue. And I could hear the doctors behind me. I could remember the lights. I remember everything. And then it went black. I had 8 treatments in 11 days, and I don't remember after that. I remember coming home and I tried to cook and I tried to get a pot, but if I went for a handle, I just passed the handle. I couldn't grab a handle. I did not know, but they told me later that when my husband came home thinking that I could be alone, he didn't find me home. I was wandering the streets. So he knew that my mom had to come and be with me for a while. And then my mother-in-law, they took turns. And I don't know, it was a period that I don't remember. It was a period I was in limbo. I don't know. I do know that I went back reluctantly 6 months later because I was still bad. And I went for the kids, the children. And after just a few of them, I don't even remember if I finished the second batch. You have to have them a certain amount. And I said to my husband, I'd rather die. I don't want another treatment. So we went back to my doctor and he said, I don't know what to do. I tried everything. And at that time, my husband had an opportunity of moving to Florida. We lived in Queens, New York. And he said, how much should we do? And the doctor said, I think you should go. I think maybe a whole new scene, maybe something, try it. We don't know what to do. So we came to Florida. We packed all my medicine, all my records. And for about a couple of weeks, I felt good, like maybe the sunshine, maybe something's going to happen. And then we met a friend and we were very close and we met at church. And I was happy to see her. I was extremely, I said, I'm happy, God, please, everything's going to be okay. And all of a sudden, without notice, I passed out. And now this was a new symptom. Besides the severe headaches, beside the blurred vision, beside the shakiness, beside the cold hands, the cold feet, not being able to think, not being, all of my symptoms. This was something that I could not control. So she suggested that I go to her doctor, and I didn't want to go. I said, no, I've been there, done that. And she begged me, so I went. And he was an osteopathic physician, and I had no idea what an osteopathic physician was. And I took all my medicine, I took all my, my history. And he said to me something that nobody ever asked me. He says, Roberta, what do you eat? And I looked at him and I thought, he's crazy. What am I doing here? What do you mean? What do I eat? He says, just think. And then I started to think, well, I don't eat. I don't eat breakfast because I've got 2 children that I'm trying to take care of. I don't eat lunch because I don't have the time to even cook or the ability. And then my mom or my mother-in-law would come over at 3:00 with the pasta, with the bread, with the hot apple pie. And then if I was really depressed, my husband would get a babysitter for 50 cents and we would go get a hot fudge sundae. I never knew the reason why I couldn't sleep at night or why I couldn't get up in the morning. So anyway, I didn't know what to do. But he said to me, let me tell you, out of all the tests that you've never had a GTT. I says, what's a GTT? He says, a glucose tolerance test. He says, let's take it. And I said, I had every test. He said, no, you didn't have this. So I went and I took a glucose tolerance test. I went back for the results. And he says, Roberta, you have a severe case of functional reactive hypoglycemia. Well, that was even very hard, even to decipher it. What is it? How do you even say it? So he says, let's put it this way. If you change your diet, I promise you that you will get better. And I said, he's crazy. He's crazy. There's no way. There's no way. So again, you're talking about 1970. You know, what is hypoglycemia? We don't have the internet, went to the library. You know, you read one paragraph and you think you understand it. Then you read a whole page and then you read a whole chapter, you know, and then I was starting to realize slowly that it was what I was eating. So how do I change? How do I unlearn? It took a long time. Then I started to read about exercise. Well, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, that was raised on a stoop. How do you exercise? You know, so I tried and it was hard. Then they said vitamins. Well, I didn't know anything about vitamins. First of all, going back to the diet, I had no idea what the difference was between a complex carb and a simple carb. You know, so everything was so foreign to me, but I was determined when I looked at the children. I said, I have to do this. And Florence, it took about 3 years. First of all, I did everything that nobody even thought about. I mean, I went for hypnosis because I had to get off of the medication. That was the first thing, and that helped. I went for acupuncture. I went to a shaman. I went to anything that I could do. I mean, my religion and my God, and they were special to me, and that's how I got through it. But I was so desperate. I wanted to get better right away, and I would try anything and everything. Well, after about a couple of years, I was able to function. I went back to school. I went back to work, and I thought this was it. Now, during this time, I never spoke to anybody about it, not even my children. So then all of a sudden, I opened up the Miami Herald and it says, anyone having harmful effects of electric shock therapy, get in touch with this committee. And what do? I call them up. I told them my story. This is, please, you have to come to Tallahassee. Florida is doing the most electric shock therapy treatments, and we want to change the law. We want them to have an informed consent. You didn't know anything about it. You didn't know anything about the consequences, or you didn't have a test, or you didn't be tested for nutritional deficiencies or any other imbalances. So I said, oh my God, I have to do this. But I had to sit down and tell my children and the story. And they said, Mom, go get them. Well, again, I was like, I just wanted a message. That's it. I wanted to tell people that before you go, I mean, it should be the last resort, but it wasn't. Well, maybe for me, they thought, but I wasn't informed. You know, I had no idea what I was going to go through. So I went to Tallahassee, told my story, and then the day after, the Miami Herald headline says, she starts a one-woman crusade, all because of shock therapy. And well, the world knew it now. Now what do? So anyway, I got asked to do a lot of talk shows. And one in particular was Y100 and the host was Tony Crabtree. So I went first one time, and then she called me back. And she kept on saying, when you're here, you know, the board lights up. Everybody wants to know, what is hypoglycemia? You know, they think they have it. Well, you know, what do they do? What type of diet? What type of test? What type of doctor do they go to? And then finally, after going more than a half a dozen times, she says, you have to start a support group. I says, a support group? What are you talking about? You know, I'm working. I'm just starting to feel better. I had got into the skincare business and makeup, and I was doing a lot of volunteer makeup at our local theater. So I went to them and I said, you know, this is what, you know, they're telling me to do. I said, but I have no idea. What am I supposed to do? You need it. we've got a lawyer, we have an accountant, we'll help you with your bylaws. Lo and behold, 1980, I formed the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation. And then I says, now what do I do? I just want to share my message. Well, I wrote to about 50 doctors in the area, told them why I started the support group, that I wanted to have monthly meetings. I wanted to see if, there had to be other people out that had a similar story. Florence, I didn't hear from one of them. So I said, what do? I had no money. I didn't know I had to, be a secretary. I had to write. I had to lecture. I had to raise funds. I had to get a board. So I wrote to Dr. Atkins. I wrote to Dr. Carlton Fredericks. I wrote to Dr. Emanuel Sharaskin, Dr. Harvey Ross, all the biggies at that time. Every single one of them answered. And every single one of them helped me for years. Wow. Where I was able to do research, where I was able, and it just mushroomed. And I did monthly meetings in Cooper City, my hometown, for over 20 years. And then we branched out in other areas, but we didn't realize that you need funds. So then how do you raise funds? And then the internet came. And then somebody volunteered and gave us our first website. And oh my God, I was answering 500 emails a month. People from all over the world, India, Africa, Pakistan, help me. I have it. My doctor doesn't know anything about it. What should I do? Where should I go? What should I eat? It was just, I didn't know. And then finally I went to, it always seemed to come to me. I went to a dinner at somebody that I knew, and I was telling them, and he says, you need to write a book. I says, I know, but I tried. And again, it just didn't work. He says, I have someone here to meet you. And it was my future publisher. He says, your book is exactly what I need. So my book came out, and I was frightened and afraid because I didn't know how to write a book. And then I found out it won the American Library Association's award as the best lay medical book.
Wow, Roberta.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's been quite a journey. We went from one medical, one website to another website. Everybody came, and then locally doctors did come. I was blessed. Doctors did come and did support us, and we did a tremendous amount of work. But it was a struggle because people didn't know what hypoglycemia was. And then here I am, a lay person with no medical degree, talking about a medical condition that people could hardly understand, hardly pronounce. So we had a lot of challenges, and I'll never forget, there was a woman named Iris Salzman, and she was very instrumental in helping Brian Weiss write his book, Many Minds, Many Masters. And I went to her lecture, and she was considered at that time one of the, I hate to say psychics, but intuitives. And she picked me out in the audience, and she said, you. I said, yes. She says, you have something. What do you do? And I says, I have an organization. She says, you want to give it up, don't you? And it was like 25 years that I was doing it or whatever. I says, yes. She says, because it's difficult, it's hard, and you can't raise funds. And she says, I know all of this. She says, but I'm going to leave you with one message. And I said, what is it? She says, you didn't choose it. It chose you. And I went home and just went on my knees, and I says, God, whatever it is, just show me the way. And we continued and continued and continued. And I can't even begin to tell you how much I felt that we did, but I wanted to do more. But then my husband got very sick, very, very sick. And he had a very rare form of leukemia plus diabetes. And for 15 years, it was difficult. So when he passed 6 years ago, I couldn't go on any longer. I said, we have to close it. I just couldn't. And then I get a phone call from someone named Wolfram Alderson. And he says, hi, Roberta. He introduced myself. And a mutual friend, Connie Bennett, introduced us. She was writing a book and wanted some of her profits to go to our organization and an organization that Wolfram was involved in, the Institute for Functional Medicine. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm embarrassed too. But anyway, I went there. Well, no, I didn't go. And he says, I want you to meet Dr. Robert Lustig and Dr. Uma Pashadi, who was very active at Swedish Hospital in Seattle, Washington. And he says, you must know Dr. Lustig. Well, I hated to say it, but I didn't know anybody. And I said to him, I cannot come. I says, I'm afraid to fly. My husband just passed. I'm just not physically well to come. And my granddaughter heard about it. And she says, Grandma, you have to be there. I will take you. And then when I got off the plane and I met Wolfram and Dr. Prashadi and Dr. Lustig, I just said, I just met my soul family. And it's never been the same. It's been an incredible, incredible journey. I never know what to expect. We have done things that I can't even imagine. And what would we have that's coming out in the next 3 or 4 months is just mind-boggling. And I'm just so blessed. I just am so blessed. So I ain't going anyplace. I mean, I came here to bring hypoglycemia to the forefront of medicine where it belongs. And I ain't going until I do it. And we'll get into it, but we're very excited about the new metabolic health symposium that's coming up in June, the 9th to the 11th. And this is the first time in 42 years that we will present a Hypoglycemia 101 CME.
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh, what an amazing journey.
It is.
All right, well, let's get into what is hypoglycemia. So let's do the causes, effects, and treatment. Let's go there.
Okay. All right. Now, first of all, with hypoglycemia, the definition. All right. Again, I'm a lay person, so I deal with a lot of lay people. So when I went to look at it, the definition, you could take one book and it has just a small paragraph. Then you take another book and it has a page or two. Then you take another book and it's a whole chapter. To me, how I feel, and when I talk to someone that doesn't know anything about it, in fact, today I wanted to print it out. I have on my Facebook, Dr. Hyman wrote something today about the amount of sugars that we ate 50 years ago. And the numbers, 25 pounds a year, and it's like 150 to 160 pounds of sugar per person per year. And now you understand why it's affecting us, why diabetes is like, taking over, our children, our young adolescents, our adults. And as Dr. Seal Harris, who founded hypoglycemia said, the low blood sugar of today is the diabetes of tomorrow. But not the opposite. It's a prelude too. So I feel, in layman's terms, what hypoglycemia is, the body's inability to handle the amount of sugars that we consume today. And it's not only sugar. You're talking about processed food. You're talking about alcohol, caffeine, tobacco. And why it's hitting children so bad, you could see that's all they're eating is sugar. Sugar is everywhere. And it's compounded by the energy drinks, the smoothies out there. So, and then they have this thought process, and the parents, and we can't really blame them, but it's their thought process. Orange juice is supposed to be so great. They don't realize that one glass of orange juice can contain 8 teaspoons of sugar. And to a parent, if they give it to them first thing in the morning, well, if one glass is good, 2 glasses have to be better. So you're starting a child out with all that sugar early in the morning, plus your cereal. So you got your cereal, that, and your donuts and your coffee and your cake. And it's just, that's basically it.
So interesting that you lumped in caffeine into that mix. So obviously alcohol, obviously potato, to anything that quickie carbs that turns to sugar quickly in the body. So potato chips and flour and wheat and all the various kinds of sugar. Do you include artificial sweeteners in your definition of sugars?
Yes.
Okay.
And I can't give you the medical reason, but what they're seeing now, that sometimes the artificial sugars play more of a role in disrupting the sugar metabolism of the body than real sugar.
Right.
So, that's what they're finding more and more. So it's a shame, because people think that, oh, well, I'm just having, a sweetener, and it doesn't. But I wish I had Wolfram here, because he will explain. He's working with allulose, and it's the only sweetener that absolutely stabilizes blood sugar. And there's a lot of science behind it. It's not just words. Mm-hmm. So, maybe he'll come on one day and he'll explain more of the science behind it.
Yes.
But it's not only the sweeteners. It's not only, when you talk about caffeine, there are some people that can handle it. I can't even have a half a cup. I get the shakes. Maybe if I have it with something, I could handle a little bit. But if I have it the second day, my blood sugar just drops. And that's why we talk so often about the diet symptom diary. So when I say caffeine, it affects so many people. Some can have it. If you do a diet symptom diary where you write every single thing down that you eat for, say, a week to 10 days, or if you don't want to do it, even a week will show you. So you write down what you have for breakfast, the time, and then you write down any symptom that you have. And then sooner or later, you're going to see a correlation. So for instance, the day that you have 2 cups of coffee, oh my God, within 45 minutes, I start to get the shakes, or I start to get the headache, or my gosh, I don't feel good. I went 3 hours without eating and I feel like I'm going to pass out. So that diet symptom diary is great. We have this all on our website. And the next best thing, and probably is even better now, is the continuous glucose monitor. We're working with Dr. Ann Childers particularly, and she's a psychiatrist. So she's seeing patients younger and younger. And before you immediately put an adolescent or a child, 8, 9, 10 years old, on a year of therapy or medication, she will put them on, let them wear a continuous glucose monitor. And 80% have a blood sugar irregularity. So it's not saying that they don't need therapy or they don't need medication, but it could be 1, much less, and 2, for a lot, the period of time could be much less. So, all of these tools are great. And another thing that we realized, that this blew my mind. So I founded the organization in 1980. 1982, we had a speaker by the name of Dr. Douglas M. Baird. And I didn't know what he was going to speak on. And he spoke about the correlation between hypoglycemia and alcohol. He says they're one and the same. They're one and the same. And he says why we don't get the success rate that we should. In fact, we don't get any practically. He says it's just like a revolving door. They go to AA, or they go on, whatever program they're on, and 6 months, a year, 2 years later, they're back. Is because they go from one addiction to another. You go to any of these meetings and you get off of, okay, you're alcohol, but what do you substitute it with? Caffeine, nicotine, and sugar. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
I bet you in modern day, the vaping would be included in that, just because they're literally inhaling sugar through the lungs now, artificial chemicals and flavors, and plus they put dabs in them. Like, it's really crazy the ways that we continue to try and assault our bodies with these substances that it creates such erratic blood sugar.
Right. And it's not, we're in the United States and we see what's happening here. Not nobody, I shouldn't say that, but we're realizing more and more what's happening around the world. It's a world problem. I mean, look what's happening in Mexico. In Mexico, these young children are drinking liters of Coke a day. The water is not available. Mothers are putting Coca-Cola in baby bottles. So, and they have the highest rate of diabetes among their children.
It's heartbreaking. It
really is.
Yeah.
And now what's happening you have to just go to the store and see what's happening. I saw the cost of eggs. Easter is coming, when we make certain things, and the price. So what's happening? Parents have to buy something, and what do they buy? Because the money is not there, and sometimes the food is not there. I mean, each time I go to one of the stores, they're out. I couldn't find paprika the other day. I went to 4 stores, but because I needed it for something I was making. But so you just have to go to the store and you see what they're packing in their shopping cart. It's the Lucky Charms, it's the Fruit Loops, it's, everything, that's what they used to. It's the cookies, it's the pies, it's the pastries.
Bread, pasta, crackers.
So, right. So where did we come? This happened to me 50 years ago when I say, what happened? What happened? And then I realized what happened, because that's the letters that I get. My doctor doesn't believe hypoglycemia exists. So what am I going to do? Then they'll say, well, he diagnosed me, but he gave me 1 sheet of paper. That's not going to do it. Then I even get letters from doctors. Several doctors said, all of a sudden, I am diagnosing children with reactive hypoglycemia more and more. The problem is, I don't know what to tell them to do.
Yes.
So I sent them copies of my book. I make copies, of suggestions and stuff like that. So let's talk about
symptoms, in terms of if someone's listening to this and they're like, do I have reactive hypoglycemia? Like, what are some of the signs and symptoms that they might be, other than getting a continuous glucose monitor? What other things can they look for to suggest that they have this?
Okay. Well, let's go over the symptoms. Okay.
Yeah.
I think so. Okay. First of all, headaches. I had the headaches and severe fatigue. If you go to bed and you sleep 8 hours a day and you cannot get up in the morning, that's a big sign. That's like a red flag. So it's the headaches, it's the severe fatigue, it's the depression. Then they don't realize it's the blurred vision. Blurred vision, a lot of people get in touch with me. Why do I have blurred vision? Cold hands and cold feet. I would remember when my husband would have to wrap them up, because I don't mean just cold. I mean like frostbitten. So temperature. Okay. Insomnia, headaches, depression, really. It's the depression. So if you have these symptoms.
Can I add to that one thing?
What?
Can I add a symptom to that list?
Can you add them?
Yeah. Would you mind if I added one?
Oh, you could add any, please.
Oh,
because let me tell you, there are like, one book says there's 46 symptoms. Another book of Nancy Appleton, who wrote suicide, she has 144 list of hypoglycemia. So yes, please tell us.
There's just one in particular that I want to add, because I think it's one of the saddest symptoms in a way, and that people can get really irritable. They can be irritable and short-tempered and cranky, and they are chronically that. And they have to work so hard to behave when there's opportunities to be social. it's like when some of their irritability can come up, and it just seems so incredibly sad to me. And I know this because my daughter has reactive hypoglycemia, and she snaps and she gets irritable. And I think, honey, we need to get you some protein and some fat and some vegetables. We need to get you some sleep and some water and some exercise, right? Like I know how to put her back together. But when she's in reactive hypoglycemia, she's so miserable, and it breaks my heart as a mom, right? I think it doesn't have to be like this, honey. You can be more or less pretty level and pretty steady, and the world can do all kinds of, irritating things, but you're not irritated. And I try and explain it to her, but she just thinks, no, it's because they're irritating. No, it is nothing. It's really very little about what's going on out there, and it's so much about what's going on with your blood sugars. Would you agree with that?
Yes. What I would suggest, again, I keep on going, by the way, we have an infographic and we have it in 4 different languages. So that would be the easiest for anyone, for a parent and for a child or an adolescent, instead of a book, because sometimes when they're just diagnosed, or sometimes when they have a lot of these symptoms, they're irritable, they're cranky, they really can't think, because I say education is crucial. But to get a book and open it up, that's why my book is so easy to read, because it's in layman's language. I would say to have her read the infographic. It's simple. And again, the diet symptom diary. And why I say it is that it could not be only sugar. Many, many years ago, there was, I don't know if you remember the Phil Donahue show. Okay, I mean, I'm really telling my age, let me tell you. But anyway, there was a doctor, and I can't remember her name, but she had a movie or a clip of little Johnny that was in kindergarten playing with all his friends, as calm as could be. And then they gave them red Jello. Johnny went berserk within a few minutes. He got up and started throwing everything around, started hitting people, starting taking the test. So it was the red dye. So again, the diet symptom diary, it could be not only sugar, it could be not only the caffeine, it could be the dye. What are they eating? And that's where it comes in. Okay, I had this horrible feeling that I was irritable, I was cranky, I was angry. What did I eat 6 to 8 hours before? And then you may pick it up. And you know what? Unless you go through like tests to find out what they're allergic to, and that can change, I don't know. But it's really the parent and the child that has to find out. And it may take a long time, but the diet symptom diary really, really helps. And if you find a doctor that really understands, that will test and treat, that's sympathetic to your needs. I know they're saying they're not out there, but they are. There are a lot of organizations, and what you're doing, that's why your work is so important. Because all of your speakers, I'm sure, have a different story and have a different suggestion. So what they have to listen to, I think you have 60 speakers? Let them speak. But tell them to take their time, a little bit at that time. 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and maybe something that one of the speakers will say, all of a sudden a light bulb will go off. And say, oh my God, that's what I was missing. Because everyone may have a different piece that is missing. For a child, we're hearing from so many children that are hypoglycemic. When we go over them, first of all, if a parent or a teacher or even a child that's 14 or 15 years old gets in touch with me, I will call them. I have to call them. And I would say half of them is what they drink. Yes. If I start going over, okay, tell me, how does your child start? It's the juice. It's the smoothie. It's the cereal. That's how it starts. And then, for instance, I did a lot of programs for schools. So after I spoke, one little girl came up to me and said, I'm raising my child by myself. She was only 16. I'm trying to get my GED. I'm trying to work. I work at a pizzeria. I hardly eat. I may have a slice, but I live on Coke all day long. Could that be why I'm so depressed and I have so much no energy? So all of a sudden, she attended, and that was a light bulb for her. And she says, I have to change. So that's why your programs are so important. So each one of your 60 people will maybe have an answer for your daughter or somebody else. Now, what I did see,
I didn't want to just make it about my daughter, but it just happens to be what I can see, one of the pieces, the rage, the irritability, that whole sort of cluster of mood issues that can be completely cleared up, that it isn't about what's happening out in the world. It's about what's going on with your biochemistry. And then the whole same thing could be going out in the world, and it may not be pleasant, but you inside can still stay calm and move through life without feeling constantly jerked around between depression and anxiety, from rage to irritability. Like, those things can be many, many times largely, if not completely, cleaned up by addressing hypoglycemia.
Right. Now, something happened about 8 months ago, and I couldn't understand. And I started to call some of our doctors, our advisors, and say, this seems just very unusual. And then I spoke to Wolfram about it. In a short period of time, parents got in touch with us about that child. They were all boys, 14 years old. And they had the same similar, severely depressed. One says, my child thinks of suicide, just stays in his room with his hoodie on. And what am I supposed to do? The doctors don't know what to do. I mean, do I start putting him on medication now? So I said, well, these are 14-year-olds. What are we seeing? 14, 16, 18-year-olds. And then we see 4, 5, 6-year-olds.
Yes.
What's happening?
Yes.
And while I'm seeing this in the last 10 years, Dr. Lustig, Dr. Pishotti, they've been seeing the diabetes numbers,
yes,
and other adult diseases. I mean, they're fierce. They're going out and really putting it on the line, because they say these children are having adult diseases. It's not only low blood sugar, it's diabetes, it's fatty liver disease, it's Crohn's disease, it's high blood pressure. It's all of that. So it's sad, because our children and our adolescents now are suffering.
Oh, absolutely, they are. I can attest to that. I've watched my own daughter struggle. So let's get to, just because we've just got a little bit more time. So we know the symptoms. It's rampant. Most of us probably fall somewhere on the spectrum, many of us severe. And we will go through experiences like you will go to doctors to do medical tests, and we'll be given all kinds of drugs and pharmaceuticals. And we might make some dietary changes, but maybe not enough to actually, you got to meet hypoglycemia with a pretty targeted, specific, therapeutic, nutritional intervention. So why don't we talk about what advice you give people? Okay, I fall under that spectrum. I have hypoglycemia. What do I do about it, Roberta? What would you say to them?
I would say, first, education is crucial. Okay, education is crucial. So you have to don't take as long as I did. What's a complex carb versus, a simple carb. So you have to understand, and then you have to see, what am I eating? And if this is what's causing it, what do I have to replace it with? And the biggest thing you have to learn, and you need help with, is that you just don't take away. You have to replace. So it's education, and then it's preparation. If you don't know what to replace it with, and you don't have it there available, it's not going to work. And you know who's great at this? And I think you interview her, Dr. Joan Ifland.
Yes.
And she talks about, all of this. And she says, What she does at the beginning of the week is she'll make a roast or a ham or a turkey and do it all at once. Put it in the oven and that's it. Then take a whole tray of all vegetables and season them up. And then you have it. You have to make it easy. You cannot make it complicated. So if you have the food there and you're hungry, you'll take it. Because if you don't, you're going to hop in the car or the kid's going to run down to the store and get a bag of Cheetos or whatever, or a Coke. So education, preparation, you got to know it. And then education, preparation, application. Then you have to apply it, and you have to apply it as a family. You can't just do it if you have 3 or 4 children. Well, one's going to start eating their Lucky Charms and stuff for breakfast, and you expect the one that has reactive hypoglycemia, diabetes, to have that poached egg, their avocado or something. The whole family has to be educated. And so it's application. So it's education, preparation, application, and support. You cannot do it alone. You have to find your family support, your friends support, spiritual support. You have to find your doctors. And I tell the people, I know this sounds ridiculous, but unfortunately, sooner or later, we come down with something. I'm not saying so much an illness, but we break our toe or we break our arm. Get your medical professionals before an emergency. Get your soul family in every area so that you build up this relationship, that you can go to the doctor and say, okay, doctor, you found out what it is. This one sheet of paper that you're giving me is not enough. We've got to find out, what do I do? What do I do? So Wolfram is trying, with the organization a long time ago, continuing medical education series and continual patient educational series.
Yes.
The patient and the parent have to be taught, not just the doctor. So we're hoping with the CME to train the doctors, about diet, because they weren't taught anything about diet. Mm-hmm. And this is what happened in 1943 when Dr. Seal Harris discovered it or talked about it. I mean, it was in the medical journals and everyone accepted it. But then in 1973, after it was in the papers, a lot of stars had it. People were saying, oh my God, I have hypoglycemia. They were going and demanding the glucose tolerance test. So what happened? The AMA was swift, and they did a 180-degree turnaround and said hypoglycemia does not exist. So it's not taught in medical school. Mm-hmm. So not only is that not taught and accepted, anything about nutrition, which is the only thing that really will solve your hypoglycemia symptoms. Mm-hmm. So, we have a lot that we have to do, a lot of work. And that's why I feel that this is such a blessing that you're doing it. You're getting our message out. You're getting, it out to the people. And I would say it depends on what book you read. There's 100 million people with reactive hypoglycemia. Now, they're all different kinds of hypoglycemia, especially now hypoglycemia and alcoholism. They're one and the same, as we spoke. Hypoglycemia now after gastric bypass surgery. That's another area. So it's affecting a lot of people. And what we're basically trying to say, before you take that pill, before you go for years of therapy, before you even have electric shock therapy, if you're at the end and been sick for so many years, just stop and think, could it be what I am and what I am not eating? People are on a merry-go-round, so they're skipping breakfast, they're skipping lunch. I interviewed some teenagers and I says, what do you have for breakfast? Oh, I don't eat breakfast. Okay, well, what do you have for lunch? Oh, I don't eat lunch. Why can't you eat lunch? I can't eat in front of the boys. It's too embarrassing. So when do you eat? 3, 4 o'clock. And what do they grab? A smoothie.
Yeah. So is the glucose tolerance, this would be my last question because I have someone else after this call, and we've just scratched the surface. I know there's so much to say about how helpful and empowering it is to really understand, there's hypoglycemia and there's reactive hypoglycemia. So we're all going to have to go out and buy your books. What's going to happen? We're going to join your support group and we're going to continue to get educated by you. But on this final question here, there are individuals that go into the doctor's office and they'll get like their A1C or some sort of like test that isn't the GTT, and the doctor's like, you're fine with blood sugars. Your A1C is 5.5 or 5.6, or they're like, you're good. You got no blood sugar issues. And they go home and think, okay, well, I guess they don't have hypoglycemia, because doctors are missing it. Their medical tests are missing it. Is it only the GTT that can capture it, or is there any other tests that we can do to biochemically validate our belief, or our intuition that we have hypoglycemia based on symptoms?
All right. The GTT is really the gold standard,
okay.
The GTT, and it's not the 2 hour or the 3 hour. Yeah. It's the 5 hour or 6, because you could drop in the 5th hour.
Okay.
However, because of young people, Dr. Colton Fredericks and many doctors do not want to give it to the young and do not want to give it to the elderly. And we can understand why. Okay. And that's why they say what we've been mentioning all along is the diet symptom diary, and start learning how to listen to your body. If you have something and within a couple of hours you feel shaky or you feel sleepy, you've got to write it down. And unfortunately, it's not easy. But you know what I say? Imagine if your daughter's getting married, you will go high and low, 20, 30 stores to get the right, wedding dress, or a car. The guys will go to, how many places to get the perfect car. Do that with your doctor. Do that with your health. If you intuitively know that something is wrong and your doctor says it's all fine, go for a second opinion. Go for a third opinion. Go for a doctor that's practicing functional medicine. I have people write to me and say, my chiropractor diagnosed me. My ophthalmologist said, you have blood sugar. I could see it by your vision. So you have to continue looking. I know you're talking about your health. You're talking about, listen to my story. And what's sad is what gives me the push and the drive is that what happened to me is happening out there today.
Oh,
So please don't stop. And then there's functional medicine, Jeffrey Bland's work, attend, our metabolic health symposium. Everything is on our website, hypoglycemia.org. Listen to all the people that you have. Everyone's going to have a new suggestion, and it could work for them, because we're basically all on the same page. We're just doing it maybe a little bit differently. We all know that 80% or more of the illnesses that we are dealing with are at the tip of our fork.
Right. Oh, I'm so sorry. I want to ask you one last question, because you're an expert on this. I have had some of my speakers say that they'll get their vegan, whole foods, plant-based folks in, and they're on the hypoglycemia, metabolic syndrome, or the insulin resistant spectrum. And they honor and they respect and want to work with them to be able to stay as best they can whole food, plant-based. But some of them say, hey, can you give me 90 days on, so to go a little bit more towards the keto paleo end of the spectrum, if you can just handle some fish maybe, or some eggs or whatever, just give me a bit of time to do a nutritional intervention in your body, and then see if we can send you back to the whole food plant-based end of the spectrum and not have this reactive hypoglycemia symptoms, or, the continuous glucose monitor isn't showing these wild sugar spikes. Has that been your experience as well? Or what would you say to people who are on the, eating a fair bit of carbohydrates and are still being reactive?
Okay. Again, I'm sorry to drill this, but I have seen people being a vegetarian and still not control their symptoms. I can't tell you how many people write to me and say, it wasn't until I introduced chicken or beef, not often, but I had to introduce more protein that I was able to control my symptoms. Yeah. So that's one. Again, now I just saw somebody say, not one size fits all.
Yes.
Well, we've been saying for 42 years, the key is individualizing your diet. So it's basically the same. So you may need more protein. You may need fish. You may need shrimp. You may need whatever it is, or chicken. Some may need beef, and some can't handle it at all. Again, we're going back to the continuous glucose monitor, which will tell you what you can and cannot eat, or a diet symptom diary. So every single one is different. That's why you need your group. You need your doctor. You need your dietitian. You need your nutritionist. And you know intuitively if they're helping you. And if not, my God, don't give up. Go find somebody else.
Okay.
You have to. You have to. So everyone is different. There are some, I've been to doctors who'll say, some can have a half a cup of brown rice. Some cannot handle it. Some can't even handle a third. It depends on the individual. And then they should read, everyone that has hypoglycemia or thinks, they should read the book by Dr. Harvey Ross, because I don't want them to be discouraged. There are stages of hypoglycemia. So if it's the first stage where you have all the symptoms, say like I did, okay, it has to be extremely strict. And maybe it'll take 3 months, 6 months, but then you'll get to stage 2, and then you'll get to stage 3. And I interviewed Dr. Jeffrey Bland 35 years ago. And I said to him, do you mean I can never have a chocolate piece of cake again? He says, I'm not saying that. He says, if your symptoms are controlled, if you are happy, if you're in a great state, and it's your birthday and it's an occasion, you could have your cake. He says, you may feel off for a little bit, but you'll get right back. He says, but if you have that same piece of cake while you're had an argument with your husband or your mother-in-law, that could act like carbolic acid. So again, it's understanding it, it's talking, education, preparation, application, support. Don't give up and join our support group. Go to hypoglycemia.org, learn about what we're doing, and particularly this symposium, and see your summit.
Okay, and this one's the podcast, but we have very similar. Sometimes we have overlap in our speakers. Yeah. So just to wrap this up, this is a really powerful lever we can pull in our health. And I'm not speaking against any whole food diet, from vegan to keto. Everything in between is cool by me. It's very individual. So for those of you that are coming in with hypoglycemia on the whole food plant-based end of the spectrum, and you're reacting to brown rice or something that should be healthy, don't be discouraged that you can't get back there. It just maybe in the early stages, in the early days, you might actually have to go lower carb, potentially. Don't know. Right. Your body will let you know, and your CGM will let you know. And the support group is a place that you can go to sort of monitor and get your health where you want to be so you're vibrantly healthy. If I do the math, Roberta, I think are you in your 70s?
Do I have to tell you?
You don't. Everyone can do the math because high school. Anyways, I'm just thinking we all want to be like you when we get to your age. That's what.
Well, I'm getting to the big one in 3 months.
Okay.
Big one, but I don't look it. I don't,
right?
My age, I feel 16 inside.
Yes.
I look at Rita Moreno. She's 90. I'm nowhere near that. She's 90. She's writing. She's on doing Broadway.
Yes.
And that's what I do. Sophia Loren, 86 years old, was just one of her biggest things because she's back in. So that's it.
This is why we do it.
I feel like a kid.
This is why we say no to chocolate cake, so we can be like Roberta when we hit that age, and all those other people that she mentioned, right? So thanks for being an inspiration and not quitting, and all those people that came in at just the right time to keep you moving forward with this message. Much appreciated.
Yeah, I got too much to do, and I have people like you that are helping me, so I ain't going anyplace.
Nice.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you would like more interviews, more information, and more inspiration on how to break up with sugar, go to my YouTube channel, Kick Sugar Coach, or my website, kicksugarcoach.com. See you next week.